Welcome into the On3 studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. It's Wednesday, June 12th, and we got a loaded show because we're right in the middle of visit season. A lot of pieces moving around on the board. We got to talk all about it, and I'm excited to be here with you guys talking recruiting once again on the Inside Scoop. But before we get going, make sure you guys are subscribed to the On3 Recruits channel, the best recruiting channel on YouTube. Thank you. All right, so today's show, we're going to talk some Miami recruiting. We're going to talk some Florida State recruiting. We're going to talk some Oregon recruiting. But first, we got to talk some Bama recruiting because we just have not talked enough Bama recruiting on the Inside Scoop. We actually haven't talked to Alabama recruiting since Keelan Russell flipped from SMU. So a lot has gone on, but in this video, I got the great Tim Watts from Bama Online, and we're going to break it all down. So let's bring on Tim Watts. Tim, we've had commitments from DB Chuck McDonald, offensive lineman Michael Carroll, offensive lineman May Waldrip. Big visitor weekend last weekend, another one coming up. I don't even know where to start, but what I want to know first is official visits. They seem to be going really good under Kalen DeBoer. What do you credit the success in getting commitments out of some of these big visit weekends? Because we don't see a lot of guys just committing after visiting, but we do at Alabama.
Yeah, I think it comes down first to hustle. You really put in the effort. You know how to get kids on campus, and a lot of this started back in the spring when they saw in my history doing this, unprecedented amount of unofficial visitors. I mean, we looked up a week before spring was over, and they had basically had all their top targets on campus. So it started there, working the phones, building those relationships. I think they do a really good job of not only working with the kid and getting to know him, but also the parent, the coaches, the mentors, the people around him. I think they work at getting everybody on board.
All right, so Alabama now has two offensive linemen committed coming out of the weekend, Michael Carroll and May Waldrip. That's two so far, but we know that they want more in this class. So who do you consider some of the top remaining targets on the offensive line board?
I mean, I think the ones you look at first is you have Jackson Lloyd and Malachi Goodman coming in this weekend for an official visit. Jackson Lloyd has been a guy that Alabama was on. Courtney Morgan had been recruiting him since when he was still back at Washington. He's a guy that's seen a fast rise in the rankings. Charles Power, Cody Belair do the best job, in my opinion, in the industry. Have him in the top 30, guy that plays three sports. So Ohio State, he went there last week. They're definitely in the mix. It's a little bit more of a battle than maybe you anticipated back in March, but his recruitment also picked up. So I think, the one thing about the offensive line, it's going to get a lot of attention at Alabama because you have Coach Cap, the offensive line coach, is really good building relationships. And the recruiting coordinator, the guy running the recruiting, is a former offensive lineman. And, at the end of the day, all coaches know their position. They played better than anything else. So they're getting a double dose of attention.
All right, Tim, the one thing in our industry that we always do is we follow the visits. And if you follow Naeem Offord's visits, now Naeem Offord, the number one player in the state of Alabama, the number one corner in the country, committed to Ohio State, but he's been visiting Alabama a lot recently. Do you think the tide is in play for Offord right now?
Yeah, I think they have to be. I mean, I think you start with the fact that he's still committed to Ohio State. They're still the front runner until proven otherwise. But I think as far as gaining ground, which is what you have to do when you're behind. Ohio State was obviously ahead. They didn't have to do that, but Alabama got him on campus 2 Tuesdays ago for an unofficial visit. Went really well, so well he came back for an official visit the next weekend that also went well. I mean, I think the parents were on the campus. Everything went really good, getting to know this staff. So I think there's a trust there developing. Also, it's not just an offered visit, but he's there for a 7-on-7 tournament. He's in Tuscaloosa now. So, as of Wednesday, he'll be there for the last 8 days. Now, he goes to Ohio State this weekend. And again, I don't think you can sleep on the Buckeyes. But where Bama was back in March, February, they're in a lot better shape now.
Yeah, and I don't think Naeem Offord obviously going to do anything now, but I think maybe down the road when you look at the totality of this recruitment, if he makes it to a couple games in the fall, you look back and you say, wow, Naeem Offord's been on campus almost 10 times in the last 6 months. And so do you think that this is a long play for Naeem Offord, or is Bama trying to get something done right now?
I think for Bama, it's a long play because you just want to chip away and get to know each other. And again, this is a new staff. And, not only was it a new coaching staff as far as head coach, but a lot of the assistants didn't come on in until as late as February. I mean, Coach Cap, Christian Robinson kind of came on later on. So you're still, all these guys are building relationships. Some of them they brought from other, from their previous stops. But I think with Alford, you just want to chip away. You just want to recruit. You want to get to know each other. You want to give him a chance to get to know each other. Also, the same for the parents. Because again, this is a brand new relationship. Now, he's familiar with the Alabama brand, and I still think that carries a lot of weight and helps. But getting to know for Alford, from what we've been told, it's going to be really important, the relationships he has on campus. And I don't think you can sleep on a guy like Ryan Williams, who's been a really good recruiter for Alabama, very popular with the prospects. They like hanging out with him. And Jalen Mbakwe, who's from the Birmingham area. We saw them on his visits hanging out a lot together, that trio. So that's something else to factor in.
Yeah. All right, let's look ahead to this coming weekend, and we're going to wrap it up with two. There's a bunch of guys coming in this weekend. Go to BamaOnline.com. They cover it all things football, all things recruiting. Go check out BamaOnline.com. But I want to talk about two prospects that are taking official visits this weekend that I think Bama has some ground to make up on. And we're talking about running back Akeelan Deer, A.K. Deer. He's committed to Ole Miss. And also edge Justin Hill, who at one time was trending to Bama, takes an official visit to Ohio State, now trending to Ohio State. But both will be in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Tim, ground to make up. Can Bama do it?
Yeah, I think so. Now, A.K. Deer, that's going to be a tough one. A Mississippi running back under 5-star consideration. That's probably a tougher one to read. Kind of surprised a lot of people when he committed, I thought. I don't think many schools, colleges recruiting him expected an early commitment. But yeah, he'll be one that's a highly contested one that could easily go to the night before signing day. So that's going to be hard. And Alabama's got to do something at that running back position too. They don't have a lot of they had two good classes in a row. Obviously, 2 classes ago with Justice Haynes leading that class. There's a lot of young talent on campus, but they definitely want to add a guy this year. With Justin Hill, I think it comes down to he has been back and forth with Ohio State. He's an Ohio kid. He's had a good relationship with Alabama. I think anytime you get a kid who goes on a visit and doesn't commit, if they're trending that way or heavy lean that way, if they still take visits, I think you got a shot, because you've seen Alabama do the opposite with top 100 Chuck McDonald, Keelan Russell, Michael Carroll. Those guys lock down their visits after visiting Alabama, and that's what you want, because if you let them leave campus, even as the leader, you risk losing them.
Yeah. All right. Well, big weekend. And Bama fans, I apologize. I promise I'm going to talk more Alabama recruiting on this channel. So tap in with me now. Comment section below. How do we feel about this class? How do we feel about this coming weekend? Who are we excited about? Let me know. Comment section below. Let's talk some Florida State recruiting, because the Noles, they're coming off a busy weekend of official visits, and they have another one lined up right around the corner. I got FSU recruiting insider Michael Langston on this video. We're going to break it all down. But first, FSU fans, go ahead, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We're trying to grow this thing. We need you FSU fans to be a part of it. So hit the subscribe button for me, please. All right. Let's bring on Michael Langston of War Chant. Mike, we got to look back before we can look forward. You guys at War Chant do an incredible job of covering everything, but I want to talk edge Zion Grady, the number 11 ranked edge in America, the former Alabama commitment. Now, since he decommitted from Alabama a couple months ago, it's been FSU, it's been Miami, it's been Georgia, it's been Auburn. But what are you feeling coming out of this? Where does FSU stand?
I think they feel really good about where they sit, just on the stuff they accomplished. Zion said kind of every time I go there, it's something I learn something new and more. But there's just I think there's a different feel of development of just how he feels. That doesn't mean other schools don't do it. I think it's just there's a high comfort just feeling at home when he's there at FSU, and I think that's why a lot of times even going into these visits, Steve Wilfong from On3 has said FSU is a team that's probably is ahead of others. I think I think FSU, Ohio State, I think Miami certainly, but even more so Ohio State of teams that are heavily in there. Georgia's another team, but we haven't heard them quite as much as the other teams. But I think overall, even though there's still visits left, I think FSU feels pretty comfortable, I guess, where their position is right now, the relationship and what they've done. So we've seen this before, how there can be some shifts on, different things that, slightly can, turn a kid's attention or favoritism of things. But I think FSU feels pretty good, and I'd probably agree with them based on the intel I got coming out of this trip so far.
Yeah, forgot Ohio State. How could I? That official visit a couple weeks ago was huge. Let's move to the number 4 running back in America, Usman Kroma. This one's been trending in a bunch of different directions. For a while, it was thought Florida State was the favorite, maybe Georgia. Now,
Yeah.
coming off an Auburn official visit, you hear a lot about the Tigers. But what did you learn this weekend when Usman Kroma was on campus?
Yeah, I was really shocked of how much of a dynamics there were as far as I guess positivity as far as what I've heard throughout the weekend on Newsma, because as we've talked about a few times, they've been fading away in this recruitment. They've been not a team that I've heard. I mean, there's times where he won't visit. He'll visit other schools
Yeah.
like Miami and Auburn. He hasn't visited FSU, so we heard that he was fading away. And then this visit happened, and then he brought all his family. He brought the most family probably I've ever seen out of an official visitor, and just throughout the visit and after the visit, I've heard there's a lot of FSU feels like, hey, we know we're strongly in it. We know we're right
Mm.
there in it. And I think the concerns that they had of already having Cam Davis in there, a talented freshman that's physical and does some of the same things that Usman does. I don't think that's a concern. I think the fit is there. He's always had the relationship with Norvell and certainly Coach Yak over there at FSU, but I think this one was more where he got a detailed look of everything, and I think he sees the way that they developed different guys like Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili and all these guys. So I think it really hit strongly on this official visit weekend. I would still say, for me, I think FSU's biggest fear is, I guess, factor would be was Georgia. I think,
Hmm.
but Georgia just picked up their second running back commit, so you wonder how that changed the dynamic. Maybe Auburn, is the main threat. So I think that's kind of where they said, I guess, going into this, but they're a major factor now. And I definitely thought I didn't think I would say that, Josh, before this visit happened.
Okay, yeah, it did seem like FSU was fading in this recruitment. That's good to know. Now, probably the biggest news coming out of the weekend was DB Ladarian Clarity. He's from Pensacola, top 200 prospect, but he came out, named FSU as leader, and is now trending heavily to Florida State on the recruiting prediction machine. Is this one
Yeah.
that Florida State could close on, maybe jumpstart summer recruiting with a commitment from a top 200 guy?
Yeah, this just feels like one that's I don't know if I want to use the word imminent, but it,
Mm-hmm.
it just feels like it's going fast. And this is I mean, he's from Pensacola. He's always loved FSU. He wanted to see being prioritized. He certainly got that in heavy doses this weekend. Nicknamed Squirrel, by the way, for those that are wondering, that's what his nickname is. But um, a guy they highly wanted in this class. But I just have a feeling, Josh, that I would not be surprised if this one went faster than I guess a lot of people expect. Where there's been talk about officially visiting Mississippi State and Washington or somebody else. I could see him, even before that, officially just wrapping this thing up, or maybe taking one official visit and then bam, he's done. I just think overall this seems to be trending in for me, in my opinion, in a imminent spot of FSU, getting some good news, to start this summer.
All right. Now let's look ahead to this coming weekend. Now there's going to be a bunch of visitors closing in on double-digit official visitors. Go over to War Chant.
Yeah.
They'll get you covered. But there's two that I want to talk about because they seem like maybe they seem like long shots to me, but I want to get your opinion. Justice Terry, the USC commitment. He's out of the state of Georgia, the number 2 defensive lineman in America. And then you got Khaleke Lockett, the 5-star wide receiver out of the state of Texas. Saxe, Texas is where he's from.
Yeah.
Met Khaleke here at the Nashville On 3 Elite Series. Great prospect, great looking prospect. Of the two, who do you think is a bigger long shot, and what's the goal of this weekend?
Yeah. Both good questions. I'm gonna say that the bigger of the long shots is, for me, Justice Terry, just because I feel like Georgia is the biggest threat
Yeah.
to pull him. With with Khalid Lockett, I mean, he is. I mean, some of the things Khalid Lockett is you raises your eyebrows when you hear it. The stuff he said, both in Nashville when he was there for the Elite Series, and when he was in Tallahassee for the unofficial visit he
Mm-hmm.
took. I think there's really strong interest in FSU with Khalid. I just very skeptical that you can hold off a guy that it's clear the home state team really wants him, and it's clear he really likes them as
Yeah.
well. So it's hard for me to see that, but I think the end goal is really just hey, we're going to show you what FSU is, what the uniqueness is of FSU, the not just the development, but we're going to show you a personal side of FSU that you're just not going to get anywhere else. You're not going to experience the personal connections that you do when you see how our players are with you and how they are with us. And they feel confident. I think that you're not going to experience that anywhere else. And I think that's a big thing. And then two, I think what you'll see a lot of is I think you'll see a lot of buzz after the visits of just how involved the head coach is and Mike Norvell in these official visits. And is it like your usual where you get there, hey, you see the coach and you might not see him for a day or maybe at the end. It's like Mike Norvell is involved in all aspects
Mm-hmm.
of these visits. So I think that's going to be a big tell where how much impact that makes on the guys. And then with Justice Terry, I mean, that's a guy that's visited FSU several times. Really good relationship with Odell Hagens, really good relationship with Alex Atkins. So I'm not going to close the door. I'm just saying there's a little more work to do to create that buzz that they're kind of looking for. But certainly, I think FSU could certainly make a big impact on both of those guys.
Yep, going to be a big weekend. All right, Mike, closes out. Any other names this weekend that FSU fans need to keep a close eye on?
Definitely all eyes for me, Josh, is on four-star wide receiver Joshua Moore. That's the
Yep.
guy that I feel like out of anybody visiting this weekend, you can certainly make a big impact. Just a guy that resonates with this offense. He loves this offense. He gets separation. He's what they covet. They don't have a wide receiver commitment in this class yet, to my knowledge. Maybe I'm missing one, but I think he can kind of really get this thing going and cranked up for FSU. When you think about there's tons of guys like Dalen McCutcheon. There's a lot of guys they're heavily involved with, so that kind of get the ball rolling. I think
Mm-hmm.
with a guy like Joshua Moore, Florida's certainly strongly in there, but I think that's a guy. And then you have several other targets that are coming this weekend that are, Zay Rainey Sales, linebacker out of Washington, officially visited was FSU commit at one time. You have a new one in four-star wide receiver Malik Clark, who they've been working on behind the scenes for a while. So and then Iverson Howard is another one. Iverson Rocket Howard is a running back that they like. Now you have Byron Lewis and you have Usman Chromo, who seem to be the top guys, but there could be a lot of dynamics that get created this weekend with a lot of unknowns of talented players that they've been working behind the scenes, but where do they really sit in these recruitments?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of excitement and a lot of intrigue, and certainly we'll be out there certainly to cover it all. But I think it's going to be another big recruiting weekend for them, Josh.
It's absolutely going to be another big recruiting weekend in Tallahassee. Mike Langston from War Chant, you guys are going to be working overtime this weekend. Appreciate you taking a
Yes,
little time dropping by the Inside Scoop today. The weather is heating up in Miami, and so is recruiting. So let's head down to Coral Gables and talk some Canes recruiting. The Canes got a pair of elite wide receivers. They just locked in a surprise midweek visit to Miami. So I got Cane Sport insider Azubi Charles on this video. He's going to take us behind the scenes of a few major recruitments. But before we get started, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruit channel. We're talking Miami recruiting all offseason. Go on, hit subscribe for me, please. All right. Bring on Azubi Charles at Cane Sport. Now, before we hit on the pair of in-state wideouts that just made that surprise official visit, let's talk Elijah Griffin. The nation's #1 defensive lineman was in Coral Gables last weekend for an official visit. Steve Wiltfong had great things to say coming out of that one, but you are down there on the ground. What are you hearing, and where do the Canes stand for Elijah Griffin?
So this past weekend went great for the Hurricanes and Griffin, and a lot of guys on that staff are really, really happy how things went. This was his second time down in Coral Gables, but the first time with his entire family, and they loved everything about Miami, seeing it for the first time. One of the things Griffin loves about the Hurricanes and that staff is Coach Jason Taylor and Joe Salavea. Both of those guys had lengthy careers in the NFL, and he believes, their experience playing in the league, they can get him there, which is his ultimate goal, after playing college football. Another interesting thing that happened during that OV was Griffin actually spoke with former five-star defensive lineman Justin Scott, who was almost in his exact shoes last cycle. Justin kind of told him his story and why he ultimately chose Miami over a lot of good programs. We know Justin was committed to Ohio State, but kind of flipped that commitment towards the end, and now he's a Hurricane. Griffin said that really stood out to him, and he said, hey, playing alongside him wouldn't be a bad idea, and they'd make for a great duo in the trenches for the Hurricanes.
Yeah, Justin Scott last year, Armando Blunt as well. Now they're trying to make a play for Elijah Griffin, the nation's #1 defensive lineman. Got to love the way Miami takes these big swings at these powerful defensive linemen. But they're not the only ones we're here to talk about. A pair of elite in-state wide receivers, Vernell Brown and Jamie French, they are currently on campus. They set a Tuesday visit midweek. Now, they were going to possibly be on campus the week before, but that OT7, 7-on-7 tournament was being held in the state of Florida. They participated in that. So now Miami gets them midweek all alone. What's the significance of this visit, of them visiting together as well?
I think this is almost an ideal situation for Miami, getting both of these guys in on a midweek visit. I feel like this gives Mario Cristobal and his staff the opportunity to focus all in on these guys and, not trying to have to juggle, 11 or 12 guys on an OV and focus on, two guys who are pretty much 1A and 1B on the top of their wide receiver recruiting board. Coach Kevin Beard has said great things about these two guys, and, the whole staff is very, very high on them. And getting those two guys in at the same time, you can kind of pitch them, hey, we can keep this thing going together. We saw what you guys just did this weekend at SFE for winning the OT7 national championship. Let's continue this down to Coral Gables. So Miami's going to be all in and focus on these two guys, and I'm excited to see what happens coming out of this midweek visit.
Yeah, and 2 weeks ago when they were here in Nashville for the On3 Elite Series, we saw them move together almost like teammates. And yes, they are teammates on 7-on-7, but Jamie French is from Jacksonville, and Vernell Brown is from Orlando, Jones High School and Mandarin High School. So they're not exactly teammates. It almost feels like a package deal, but we know it's not. There are a couple teams that overlap their recruitments, and Miami's a big one. Let's talk Vernell Brown first. Who do you view as Miami's biggest competition heading into this visit?
I think that's got to be Ohio State for Vernell Brown. We all know Coach Hartline has had a great track record of landing, big time wide receiver, and especially, doing his thing down in the Sunshine State. But for Brown, Miami offensive coordinator has kind of, told him his vision for him. He kind of sees him playing, that kind of Tank Dell role that he had in Houston when he coached him, and a Tavon Austin role when he had him at West Virginia, which is kind of, the thing that's keeping, Miami in the mix with Vernell, among a lot of other things. But he has a plan laid out for him. He's told him that plan, and it's proven with guys like Tank Dell and Tavon Austin, like I just mentioned. But I do think Ohio State is going to be a team to watch, and obviously Florida with all his ties to that program, his dad playing there, his sister running track there currently, and a bunch of other family members, playing in Gator country. But those two schools right now, I think, are Miami's two stiffest competitors for Vernell Brown.
Yeah, and then Vernell Brown will take a couple more visits, and he's going to make a decision in July. So we're technically maybe 5 or 6 weeks away from Vernell Brown deciding. All right, let's move on to wide receiver Jamie French, the 5-star out of Jacksonville, Florida. He's coming in, and whenever he takes a visit lately, he's kind of named a leader coming out of that. He's had Texas as a leader. He's had LSU either in the 1 or 2 spot, and Miami has always consistently been there, maybe in that 3 spot, but they've consistently been there. Do you think that we could be hearing about Miami leading when this visit ends?
Yeah, things go well. Like you mentioned, when French leaves the school, they kind of continue to climb in his recruiting. And, Miami's always been in that group of the top schools. And, they're just letting him know, hey, you do not have to leave the Sunshine State to succeed. We have everything that you need down here. And he's hearing it out. Miami was his first offer ever. And I know the staffs have changed a little bit with Coach Cristobal taking over, but he still holds that very, very highly. And he loves, Coach Kevin Beard, Coach Cristobal. They're making him feel welcome in Miami. But, like you mentioned, those first 2 schools, LSU and Texas, I feel like they're going to be hard to beat. But, Coach Cristobal and that staff aren't going to give up anytime soon. French is expected to announce on the 30th, so we'll see, how this visit goes, and we'll know a little bit more about everything coming out of it on Thursday.
Yeah, and even if French decides on the 30th, I mean,
yeah, It's going to be a wild one to the end, I think,
Right,
with this.
right. I think, he still has visits set to Tennessee next weekend, and then he'll finish June with a official visit to Texas. And then, like you said, could be a summer decision. We'll see on that. Miami, though, they are cooking. First commitment of the summer came over the weekend. Birmingham, Alabama, 3-star corner Timothy Merritt jumped on board. So obviously my next question is, who could be next for the Canes? Because we know it's going to be a busy summer.
Yeah, so this upcoming weekend, set to host, guys like DJ Pickett and Dallas Wilson for their third OV. I'm looking at another prospect, a local guy, Miami Central defensive back Amari Wallace, who I think the Hurricanes are in a great spot for. He's a local guy who Miami's been recruiting since every time he visits Miami. He just says great things about that program. He's going to be the guy I watch this weekend, and I think Miami can continue that run of cornerbacks because they're really focusing on amping up that secondary this cycle. So he's one of the guys that I'm watching a lot coming out this weekend, and I do think if things go really, really well, I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls a trigger and ends up committing to Miami after this weekend's all said and done.
Yeah, a huge weekend on tap for the Canes. Go to canesport.com. Go check it out. You guys do an incredible job of not only covering recruiting, but the football team as well. Go check it out, Canesport. So now, Miami fans, talk to me. How we feeling about Elijah Griffin? Comment section below. What about these two elite in-state wide receivers? And also, who do you guys think will be the next commitment for the Miami Hurricanes? Tap in, comment section below. Let's talk some Ducks recruiting. Oregon is now in the top 10 of the On3 industry rankings after landing a huge commitment from offensive tackle Zaire Addison of Tampa, Florida. But Oregon is not done. And on this video, I got Justin Hopkins of Scoop Duck. We're going to break it all down on the latest news. But first, Duck fans, get locked in to the best recruiting channel on YouTube. Go ahead, hit subscribe for me, please. All right. Let's bring in Justin Hopkins of Scoop Duck. Now I'm talking about Zaire Addison. He committed yesterday, number 15 ranked offensive tackle, 180 overall out of Tampa, and UF, Miami, FSU, Colorado, Georgia, they were all in on him, plus more. Take us behind the scenes. How did Oregon get this one done so early?
Yeah, I think this is one, when you kind of look back at it, makes a ton of sense because I think if we're sitting here talking to Alik Terry, the offensive line coach at Oregon, I bet you this was one of his very first phone calls when getting the job last year. And I think there was a lot of investment there after watching this film. And I know, from talking to people at Oregon that they view Addison as one of the best offensive tackles in the country. Mm-hmm. I realize he's not top 5, not top 2, top 3, but they very much view him in that light. And thus, I think Oregon making that massive early push, recruiting him as heavy as frankly anybody else they have on the board today. I think those were a lot of the big things. They brought him out, made him feel close to home, really put a lot of investment in the family and recruiting them as well. And as we know, obviously that's paid off for the Ducks.
Yeah, really incredible land. Now, and, he is just the first. And, like you said, he's ranked number 15 in the country. But his recruitment, the teams that were involved with him was as if he was a top 5 prospect at his position. So Zaire Addison, the first offensive lineman to commit to the Ducks in 2025. Justin, who could be the next offensive lineman to commit?
Well, oddly enough, when Zaire Addison visited Oregon this past weekend, they also hosted Austin Pay and Dimitri Manning for official visits as well. Both are offensive linemen, but much closer than Zaire Addison, at least geographically. And right now, the smart money, my money's on Dimitri Manning. My coworker that works with me on Scoop Duck, Max Torres, put in a pick for the Ducks yesterday. I'm quickly going to follow him with that pick as well. I think the Ducks lead there. And if Manning isn't the very next commit for Oregon, I would wager he's at least the next offensive lineman that probably commits to the Ducks.
All right, that offensive line class is going to start shaping up quickly now that Addison's on board. Now, the pipeline from Oregon to Tampa is up and running. Zaire Addison along with Dallas Wilson, 2 big pickups. But who could be next? Well, maybe DJ Pickett. Yes, he's from Zephyr Hills. It's about 50 miles north, but who cares? We're going to consider it Tampa because it sounds good. DJ Pickett, he comes in for an official visit in about 2 weeks. Ducks feeling good about their chances here with the 5-star corner?
They really just kind of quietly felt confident, not cocky, not, hey, he's ours, we're going to get him, don't worry about it, but confident that, hey, we're in this recruitment a little more than most think. Now,
Mm-hmm.
of course, you and I both know getting these kids that 5 stars that Florida, Georgia, LSU, that everybody wants back in that footprint, getting them to come and commit 3,000 miles and stay committed 3,000 miles away is really difficult, right? It's really, really tough. So I think there's certainly a confidence there, but even, the Dan Lanning and his staff at Oregon know, hey, that's going to be a tough one. They're going to have to grind, but you absolutely have to love the fact that Oregon's getting that final official visit in the month of June. Whether he takes more official visits after that in the fall or whatnot, we don't know yet. But right now, you have to at least look at Oregon as a serious threat there. And I think the Zaire Addison commitment and addition really strengthens where Oregon's at with Dallas Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Now you put those two guys on DJ Pickett. And like you said, hopefully that pipeline from Tampa or Tampa-ish to Oregon remains strong.
All right. And then this weekend, let's stay with the top end DBs because Dorian Brew and Naeem Offord are both coming in for official visits. As it stands now, maybe a bit of a long shot for both, but who do you think right now Oregon stands to a better chance with?
Probably splitting hairs. We both know those are going to be tough. I think the one that might stand out to me a little bit more is Naeem Offord. He's talked a lot about Oregon. I know the visit opened his eyes a few weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and he really had a lot of glowing remarks there. Of course, that's not going to be an easy one to peel away, but I think if I'm splitting hairs there, it might be that one. Dorian Brew stands out a little bit to me too, though, because of track and field, and Oregon has a great track program, and we know he's an elite athlete off of the football field as well. So I'll say Offord, but it's probably really close, and of course they're both going to be really tough.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the visitor list right now. 15 official visitors in Eugene. ScoopDuck.com is where it's all going to take place this weekend. You guys go check it out. Justin Hopkins, thanks for taking a little time to stop by the Inside Scoop.